I found out my younger brother had been sleeping with my wife when my son walked in on them. He was 6 years old. He didn't understand what he saw. He just came downstairs to ask if he could have a snack, and instead, he found his uncle and his mother in our kitchen. In a way that no child should ever have to see. My son didn't cry. He just stood there in his dinosaur pajamas holding his empty bowl, and my brother, my own brother, had the nerve to say, "Hey buddy, go back upstairs, okay?" I wasn't home. I was doing a double shift at the plant in Sarnia. I didn't find out until 3 days later, when my son told me about it like it was just a thing that happened. Like he'd seen something weird on TV. Uncle Danny was hugging mommy in a funny way, he said. He was eating cereal. He didn't look up. I sat with that sentence for about 10 seconds. Before something in my chest collapsed. My wife, Rebecca, we'd been together since university. We met at Western in second year. Stayed together through a semester abroad she did in Halifax. Through my first job. Through the layoffs in 2019. Through a miscarriage that nearly broke us both. We'd built something. Or I thought we had. And my brother Danny, he was 4 years younger than me, 31 at the time, still figuring his life out. Always a little too comfortable borrowing things without asking. Money. Tools. Apparently my marriage. When I confronted Rebecca that night after putting my son to bed, she didn't deny it. She sat at the kitchen table and she said, "It only happened a few times." Like frequency was what mattered. Like I was asking about overtime. Not about her sleeping with my brother in the house we owned together, in the city where we were raising our kid. I asked her how long. She said, "A while." I said, "How long is a while?" She said, "Does it matter?" I left the room. I went and sat in my truck in the driveway for about an hour. It was November, so it was cold and dark, by 5:30, and I just sat there watching the light in my son's bedroom window, that little orange glow from his nightlight. That's what kept me from doing something I'd regret. That light. I called Danny the next morning. He picked up on the second ring, which told me he'd been waiting. He started talking before I could say anything. He said he was sorry, that it had been a mistake, that he hadn't meant for it to go anywhere. I asked him how long. He gave me the same non-answer. Then he said something that I think about a lot still. "I didn't want to hurt you, man. Things got complicated. Things got complicated." I hung up and didn't call him back. Here's what I didn't know then. Rebecca was pregnant. She told me 4 days later. She sat me down in the living room, and I noticed she'd cleaned the whole house first. Like tidiness was some kind of buffer. And she told me she'd just found out, that she wasn't sure whose it was. That she wanted us to try to work through it together. She said together a lot. She said we a lot. She talked about counseling, about commitment, about how much our son needed stability. I listened to all of it. I didn't say anything until she was finished. Then I said, "You need to take a DNA test when the baby is born." She started crying. I went to bed. I didn't sleep. I just lay there doing what people do at 3 in the morning when their life has caved in. I went back through every memory, every weekend, every time she'd said she was going to visit a friend, every time Danny had showed up at the house, and I'd been happy to see him. I was looking for the moment I missed. There's always a moment you missed. I found about 15 of them. I called my parents the next day. Not to vent. I thought they deserved to know before it got further. My mother answered. I told her what had happened, calmly, all of it. There was a long silence and then she said, "Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure?" I said yes. Another silence. Then, "Danny's had a hard year, sweetheart. You know how he gets." I know how he gets. I'd been covering for how he gets since we were kids. He'd borrowed $1,400 from me in 2021 and paid back $400. He'd missed my wedding rehearsal dinner because he lost track of time. He'd shown up drunk to my son's first birthday. I'd always made excuses. The whole family had. He was the younger one, the one who needed more patience, more grace, more time. And now this. My mother said she hoped I'd find a way to forgive him. That family was family. That holding on to anger would only hurt me in the end. I said he slept with my wife. She might be carrying his child. And your first instinct is to tell me to forgive him? She said, "I just don't want to lose both my sons over this." I said, "You're not losing me. He lost me." I hung up. My father called an hour later. He was gentler about it. My dad has always been the quieter one, but the message was essentially the same. He said Danny was devastated. He said he'd been crying. He said he wanted a chance to make things right. And I remember thinking, he's crying. My brother slept with my wife and fathered what might be his child and he's crying. And my parents are calling me to make sure I know about it. I told my dad I needed some time and I'd be in touch. I gave myself 2 weeks to think. I took my son to stay at my buddy Warren's place in London. Warren and I have been friends since high school. And his wife Helen is one of the most practical people I've ever met. She took one look at my face when I showed up with 2 duffel bags and a 6-year-old in hockey socks. And she said, "Stay as long as you need." She didn't ask questions. She just made my son a grilled cheese and put on a movie. Those 2 weeks were the clearest thinking I'd done in years. Warren and I talked a lot. Late at night after the kids were in bed. He didn't tell me what to do. He just asked good questions. What does your son need? What can you actually rebuild and what are you just hoping for? What kind of life do you want him to grow up in? I kept coming back to one image. My son in his pajamas, holding that empty bowl. He'd seen something he couldn't unsee. And Rebecca had let that happen. She'd been so deep in whatever was going on with Danny that she hadn't even thought about the fact that our 6-year-old could walk downstairs at any moment. She hadn't thought about him at all. That was what made the decision, in the end. Not the betrayal, as massive as that was. It was that, the not thinking about him. I went back to the house when I knew Rebecca would be at work. I packed what I needed, my son's things first, then mine. Clothes, his favorite books, his hockey bag, the stuffed dog he'd had since he was 2. I loaded everything into my truck, and my buddy Warren followed me with his Jeep to fit the overflow. It took about 3 hours. I left a note on the kitchen table. It said, "I've taken Oliver. He's safe. Contact my lawyer." I had already spoken to a family lawyer in London. A woman named Sinclair who had been recommended by 3 different people. And who within the first 10 minutes of our consultation, made me feel like I wasn't crazy. She walked me through the Ontario Family Law Act, explained what primary residence meant, what I was entitled to, what Rebecca was entitled to. What we'd need to figure out about the new baby if it turned out to be Danny's. She was calm and direct and didn't waste my time. The first thing she told me to document was the incident my son had witnessed. She said it gently, but she said it clearly. That was relevant. A child exposed to a parent's affair in that way, that was something the court would consider in determining what environment was in his best interests. I wrote everything down that night. Date, time, what Oliver said, word for word. I kept a record from that point forward. Rebecca called that evening, frantic. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was a lot of things at once, angry, scared, pleading. She said I had no right to take Oliver without telling her. I sent her lawyer's contact information. My parents called. I didn't answer. Danny called from a number I didn't recognize, which told me he knew I'd blocked him. I didn't answer that either. In the weeks that followed, things got messy in the way these things always do. Rebecca's lawyer sent letters. My lawyer responded. We negotiated temporary custody arrangements while the divorce proceedings started. Oliver split time between Warren's place and eventually, a 2-bedroom apartment I rented in London. Ground floor, small backyard, good school nearby. I enrolled him at Stony Brook Public within a month. His teacher sent me an email after the first week, saying he was adjusting well and had already made a friend named Kieran, who also liked dinosaurs. I read that email probably 4 times. Rebecca's pregnancy progressed. The DNA test, done prenatally through a clinic in Toronto, confirmed what I think part of me had already known. The baby was Danny's, not mine. I got the results on a Tuesday afternoon, sitting in my truck in a parking lot outside a Tim Hortons in London, and I remember thinking I should feel something huge. Instead, I just felt very, very tired. I called Sinclair. She said, "This simplifies some things and complicates others." She was right on both counts. The divorce moved forward. Rebecca and I divided our assets. The house was sold, and after the mortgage and legal fees, we each walked away with something workable. It wasn't what I'd built toward, but it was enough to start from. I put a chunk of Oliver's share into a registered education savings plan in his name. That felt important. Like planting something. Work was its own anchor. I'd been a project coordinator at the plant for 5 years. And in the middle of all of this, I pushed harder than I probably should have, but it kept me sane. My manager, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd been at the company longer than I'd been alive, pulled me aside one afternoon and said, "You're doing good work. Whatever's going on at home, you're not letting it show here." That meant more to me than she probably knew. 8 months after I left, I was promoted to senior coordinator. 6 months after that, I moved into a supervisory role with a modest raise. Not life-changing but meaningful. We're not rich, we're comfortable. Oliver plays hockey on Saturday mornings and I drink bad coffee in the stands with the other dads, and it is, without exaggeration, one of the best parts of my week. My parents and I have spoken, but things are different. My mother calls more than my father does. She doesn't bring up Danny unless I do. She came to Oliver's hockey tournament in March and cheered louder than anyone in the arena, and afterward she hugged me and said she was sorry. Just that. No qualifications, and I believed her. We're rebuilding something. It's slower and smaller than what we had before, but it's real. Danny and I have not spoken. I don't plan to change that. Rebecca and I co-parent Oliver through a schedule that Sinclair helped us negotiate. He's with me the majority of the time, with her on alternating weekends and certain holidays. The arrangement works because we don't talk unless we have to, and when we do, we keep it to Oliver. She had her baby in the spring. A girl. Oliver has met her once briefly at a handoff. He came home and told me about it in a matter-of-fact way that I've learned is just how he processes things. He said, "She's small, she makes a lot of noise." Then he asked if we could have pasta for dinner. We had pasta. I've been asked, since all of this, whether I regret how fast I moved, whether I should have tried harder to save the marriage, Or at least to manage things as more carefully. More slowly. And I understand why people ask that. I do. But here's what I know. The moment I walked into that lawyer's office in London and started talking, something in me that had been clenched for weeks finally loosened. Not because I had a plan. Because I had stopped pretending the situation was something I could absorb and move past. Some things you can work through, some things you cannot. And the clarity I needed didn't come from therapy, or from long conversations, or from waiting to see if the feeling would change. It came from my son, standing in the hallway in his dinosaur pajamas, not even knowing what he'd seen. He needed me to see it clearly so he wouldn't have to. I'm 36 now. Oliver just turned 7. He lost his first tooth last month and ran out of his room at 7 in the morning, holding it up like he'd found treasure. I took a photo. I sent it to no one in particular, just saved it to my phone, for me. For us. That's enough. That is genuinely enough.